Welcome back, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective, the podcast with subject matter experts in marketing. So, you want to grow your B2B business. How will you approach your audience, how they think, your goals, your marketing mix, metrics, revenue model, and future? Have you laid out the necessary strategies to fuel your revenue growth? Tom Shapiro is the CEO of Stratabeat, an agency focused on helping mid-sized B2B companies grow through marketing, branding, and design, and he's also the author of Rethink Your Marketing. And on this episode, we'll discuss B2B marketing, audience targeting, getting people's attention and cutting through the clutter and noise, and laser focusing on your goals. So let's tune in to a rethinking expert with a thinking shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Well, Tom, thank you so much for joining us on A Shark's Perspective today. If you would tell us a little bit about your background and your career to date.
Sure. So I've been in marketing for many, many years. I started back in '94, actually. So before Google existed and before most people had emails, I was already building websites.
There was life before Google? Just kidding. Just kidding.
Yeah, so I was very early to the digital game, and I've been in digital ever since. And a little over 7 years ago, started an agency called Stratabeat, and so we're a branding, web design, and marketing agency. We serve B2B, mid-sized B2B companies, and we're based in Boston.
Excellent. So let's talk about your book. I thoroughly enjoyed Rethink Your Marketing. 7 strategies to unleash revenue growth. And, as I read through it, I like how you had it laid out. And I want to talk a little bit, if we would, about some of the different topics in there. In particular, rethink your audience. What do you mean by rethinking an audience?
Sure. So rethinking an audience is something that is incredibly important and can unleash exponential growth, and it's something that you rarely hear marketers talking
Well,
about.
especially brand marketers. So it's interesting in particular that you guys bring it up.
Yeah, it's something that's not sexy. It's not newsworthy. You're not going to read it. It's not going to be on the cover of a magazine this month.
Right.
Yet, it's one of the most powerful things that you can do. And so I'll give you an example. So at one company that I worked out previously, when I joined the company, everyone was super busy. The phone was ringing off the hook. Everyone was running around all day long, every day. But what I noticed was the company was trying to go after everyone equally, and it was clear over time that the best clients were software companies. So other clients might have a project that's a few $1,000s. The software companies had projects that were 6 figures. They would easily be 200, 300, $400,000 a piece. And the software companies would have repeat business. And so they were multi-million dollar accounts. And so a few of us convinced the founder of the company to fire every other client
Mm-hmm.
outside of software companies. And we focused exclusively on targeting software companies. And the company then grew by 250% overnight, was acquired for a multiple of revenue, and it was a huge success story. And so it was very fast growth simply because we changed the audience focus, we changed
Mm-hmm.
the audience segmentation, and we didn't change anything else.
Have you tried that with more of a B2C type approach where you're defining the audience, or has it been more of a specialty focus within B2B?
So my career has mostly been in B2B.
Sure.
I do have experience with some B2B, B2C companies. Kraft Foods was one of my clients, and I worked with about 10 different brands at Procter and Gamble. But I would say about 90% of my career has been on the B2B side.
Well, a lot of it still applies, especially as you build personas and segments. And it's just amazing that there are a lot of companies out there that still live, sexy or not, in that sort of linear spray and pray. And they can define their personas, but they can't necessarily, hone in and specifically target them in their ad delivery. So talk a little bit about rethinking how they think.
Sure. And this is a fun one. Every one of your target audience has a brain, and so yeah, if you think about it, it makes sense to understand as much as possible about the human brain, so that you can connect more directly with your audience, and you can engage more deeply, and your message will resonate in a deeper way with them, and you can drive them to the actions that matter most. And so one of the things I like to point out in understanding how they think is that ironically we're not very rational creatures.
Sure.
If you look at the human brain, although it's about 30 times as powerful as the world's most powerful supercomputer, so pretty powerful, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, what you find is that on the conscious level, there's not that much going on. So on a subconscious level, you might have 11 million bits of sensory information passing through the brain at any second of the day. So 11 million bits of sensory information, right? That's every second. And you compare that to the conscious side of your existence, and it's only 40 bits of sensory information every second. So 11 million versus 40 bits. And so really, we as human beings really live our lives on a subconscious level, and we make our decisions on a subconscious level, so much so that Nielsen has said that 90% of our decisions are based on the subconscious, and Harvard Business School professor Gerald Daltman has said that it's up to 95% actually based on the subconscious. And so it makes sense, Shark, for us to really focus in our marketing in tapping into our audience's subconscious, connecting with them there. And I'll give you an example. So the neuroscientist Antonio Damasio ran studies on people who had damage to the part of the brain that triggers emotions. So in other words, these people could not feel any emotion. They're fully functioning adults. You wouldn't know that anything's wrong with them, but they just don't feel anything. They don't feel angry. They don't feel sad. And what he found was these people could not make decisions, including purchase decisions. And so what he uncovered was, as a creature, we need emotions to make decisions. We make decisions based on our emotions, and then we rationalize them. It's not the other way around. We don't make a rational decision and feel good about it. We actually make our decisions based on emotions and then rationalize them.
So, do you think any more about the noise you have out there in the market as so much more of this is absorbed in the subconscious? Do you look at that at all in as part of your marketing mix?
Absolutely, all the time. Deviation and surprise is a
Exactly.
critical factor in any type of marketing, precisely for what you're pointing out. There's so much noise out there. There's over 5,000 messages a day that anyone is going to typically encounter, and the human brain just simply can't process all that information. It's
Mm-hmm.
cognitive overload. When you couple that with the fact that the human brain wanders, just naturally wanders, 30 to 70% of the time, um, then you realize that as a marketer, you're up against a big challenge, right?
Yeah.
Not only is
Squirrel.
there right, there's just way too much noise out there.
Exactly.
On top of that, the way that we deal with it as humans is we tune out. We daydream, we wander, we think of other things, we're not paying attention,
Right.
and that's our normal state. And so, how do you break through? Well, you break through by deviating from normal patterns. You deviate from expectations. You deviate, and that captures their attention, because otherwise, their brain is it's a prediction engine, right? It wants to predict what's happening next, and that's part of the old brain, right? Right, the fight or flight type of part of your
Of
brain,
course.
where it's just figuring out what it has to pay attention to and what it doesn't. And so, if you're not cutting through all the noise, then you're going to have a very difficult time grabbing someone's attention and having any type of messaging really resonate on a deeper level.
Well, that's another reason why so many people say, today create a spectacle, something that really sort of stands out from amongst the mix. And it's unfortunate why so many marketers get into sort of a cookie cutter approach when they really need to rethink, if you will, even their marketing plans just to do something different. So then let's talk about one of my favorite expressions, and it's another chapter in your book. But a goal without a plan is just a wish. And you talk about rethinking your goals. Kind of elaborate, if you will, on that.
Yeah, so I run an agency, and prior to this, I was part of various agencies, and I was also on the client side. And one thing which always strikes me is whenever we do a discovery with a new client or even with a new prospect, we always, always, always start by asking them about their marketing goals, because dependent on their specific marketing goals, our recommendations might be completely different, right? Like if you want to grow by 20% in the next year, that's very different than, say, growing by 10x in the next 6 months. Or let's say you're focused on a specific region for a specific product, that's very different than wanting growth across the board or growth for a very new type of launch that you're planning. And so we always ask, okay, what are your goals for the coming year? And typically the answers we get are shocking in their vagueness. Oftentimes we'll hear, oh, we want more
Right.
leads, right? Or, oh, we want more sales. And I say, okay, so you want more leads. If we got you one more lead, would we hit your goals? And they laugh and they say, of course not. And I say, okay, how about two leads? They say, of course not. And I say, okay, give us a number, right? Be very specific, have a deadline, understand exactly what you're trying to achieve, and then you can customize your marketing to achieve that um, very, very directly. And that's the most efficient, powerful way to achieve your goals, is to know exactly what you're trying to do. It's one of the main failures of mid-market companies, where somehow they can get by as startups, just kind of going after anything that comes in the door. But once you're a more mature, established company, you really do need to have strategic goals and understand where you're going strategically. Or otherwise, you're just going to go around in circles. You're going to flounder. You're going to waste a lot of money, a lot of resources, a lot of time, just being too scattered.
Well, we talked a little bit about marketing mix and creating spectacles and being noticed, but how do you get, what kind of guidance do you give for that lead generation and feeding that beast, if you will, when you look at marketing mix, with so many people just dumping more and more dollars into the biggest search engine out there, Google. At some point there aren't as many hand raisers, and you've got to find new sources for leads. So, and customers are harder to acquire than they used to be. Where do you take a look at the broader scope of your marketing mix and all the types of channels and platforms available?
Sure. So let me answer that in two parts. So the first part is understanding the audience in as much
Sure.
detail as possible, because that will dictate the marketing mix. And then I can give you a very specific example based on that. What we do is we want to understand the audience segments and have those documented. And within each of those segments, we want to have defined personas. I speak at conferences around the country, and I often will ask the audience for raise of hands how many in the audience have documented personas per audience segment, where if I walked up to them right at that moment, they could show me. So it's not in their heads, it's not that they've talked about it. I want clear documentation. And typically, in pretty much any marketing conference I go to, less than 5% of the audience has documented personas. And so it really starts there. You have to understand your audience, and you have to have the right personas. So a persona that tells me whether your dog's name is Butch or Spike doesn't
Sure.
help me at all target you. But if I understand the problems that you're facing, like, oh, you can't keep up with the changing technology in your industry, gotcha. That's a very significant issue that we can latch onto and help you solve. Or, oh, we don't have enough bandwidth to achieve the goals that our CEO is demanding of us, so we can't grow fast enough. And so you have to construct your personas in a way that's very, very focused on problem solving. And then, don't worry about all the little details that a lot of marketers will include in personas, because you just want to be efficient and very direct with solving problems. And then what you want to do is map the customer journey, or in agile speak, the user story. And that's from the time that this issue comes up to the time that they start researching solutions, and their entire journey all the way through to the solution. Map it out. What exactly are they thinking at each step, and how can you address their needs at each step in a highly supportive, um, highly helpful manner. And, and from there, you'll understand where they go online exactly and what they're looking to do. Even if they come to your website, the question is, what do you want
Mm-hmm.
them to do? What do you expect them to do? What do you want them to do? What's going to be most helpful for them? And oftentimes we'll ask new prospects who come to us, and they can't even answer that basic question. What should someone do as soon as they land on the site? And so let me give you an example of how to really rethink a marketing mix. This is at the last agency that I was at, which was iProspect. When I joined, I was the 85th employee, and at the time, the main marketing vehicle for the company was super large industry conferences. And so we're talking about, if we had a booth at a conference, we might spend 30, 40, $50,000 on
Mm-hmm.
one conference to have a team there. Now, the problem that I saw with that was, okay, so you talk to a prospect, and that's great, but then they talk to 20 of
Exactly.
your
Yeah.
competitors right after that, right?
Who's got better
And so
tchotchkes?
I thought there's got to be a better way. Yeah, it was just way too crowded. And although yes, of course you can get some customers that way, it didn't feel to me to be the most logical way to connect directly and most deeply with these with the prospects. And so myself and a colleague came up with the idea to do local, really small, intimate um, events. And the first one that we did was at the House of Blues in Chicago. And Sharp, we only had 10 people show
Mm-hmm.
up to the first
Mm-hmm.
one, only 10. And so you think, okay, going from a conference with thousands and thousands of people to a small event with only 10 people, probably a failure, right? But actually, what happened was one of those companies gave us a contract for multiple millions of dollars. So it was a multi-million dollar contract. And another prospect who was in the room gave us a contract that was six figures large. So we were very happy about the results, and we did another one. And again, we had a multi-million dollar contract come our way. And so we kept on doing these small events. We turned it into a road show, and it became the number one lead driver for the company
Mm-hmm.
very, very quickly, and it helped us go from 85 employees to over 700 employees in under
Mm.
5 years.
Well, another thing you brought up, talking about the website, was metrics, and how do you, what kind of guidance do you give companies on rethinking their metrics? I know in particular, attribution is so hard for people, for a lot of companies to measure, but let alone know what to expect on how to measure their organic traffic or where to push them. But how do you guys kind of look at that?
Sure. So we want to look at it holistically. And I'll give you an example. So we had a company come to us, and they were very proud of their knowledge hub. They had a lot of content, and they were convinced that it was helping them make a lot of sales, and that it was a differentiator, and that it is a real asset for the company. And uh, we started looking at it from a behavioral analytics perspective. And so, in other words, we wanted to understand not only how many people were visiting the Knowledge Hub, but we wanted to understand exactly how they were experiencing the Knowledge Hub. What were they doing? Were they scrolling down the pages? What were they clicking on? Where was their attention on the page? So we looked at scroll mapping, we looked at heat mapping, we looked at click mapping. We watched video recordings of actual users on the site. And so this is not in a lab, it's not a focus group. These were actual users. And what we found was no one was clicking on what this company wanted them to click on. No one was downloading anything, and they weren't scrolling down the pages. And so, in other words, their Knowledge Hub was an absolute failure. In fact, we would argue it was doing more damage to the brand than good, because clearly they had a lot of traffic. Like if you looked in Google Analytics, they had a lot of traffic to these pages. The problem is when you looked deeper into the experience that they had on those pages, it was a horrible experience. And you were driving people away. And so that's just one example of how you can't just take one metric and make a decision based on that one metric. You really need to cross-reference a lot of different metrics to really get a more holistic picture of what's successful and what's not successful for your business.
Then let's talk a little bit about the revenue model, because I agree with you. But when you start trying to push companies, and I'm sure the example you used earlier with when you decided to fire all the non-software clients, that's hard for a lot of finance people or your C-level executives to really absorb and agree with. But how do you push rethinking a revenue model to help change a company's decision making on where they should target, for their customers?
Sure. So we want to look at where the biggest levers are for the business. And if there's a lever that leads to exponential growth, then you really need to have a strong backbone, right? You need to have a spine and to make bold decisions. And we find that this is a challenge at many companies is they're not willing to make very bold
Oh, agreed.
decisions, right? They're willing to iterate, they're willing to test something very minimally, but no one wants to stick their neck out and make a decisive, bold move that could have exponential effects on the company. And so, yeah, when we fired half of our clientele at the company I was telling you about, and that led to 250% growth immediately, um, that certainly took a very strong backbone of the founder of the company to go along with that decision. And many companies just don't have either the person who's in charge of marketing or the CEO who's willing to make that bold of a bet. However, in my book, we document over 50 different case studies. And in every single case, what we're pointing to is bold moves, bold decisions, things that go against the grain. Moving in a horizontal manner. Um, you know, looking at lateral thinking rather than just doing what others are doing, but trying to outdo them at the same thing, right? And so what we say in the book is you can't tinker around the edges and expect exponential growth. You need to make absolutely bold moves. Think of Apple, right? Why were they so successful when Steve Jobs came back? Because remember, when he came back, they were about 60 days
Mm-hmm.
away from bankruptcy. And one of the this most strategic moves that he made, which was a very bold move, was to move towards an ecosystem. And so instead of just selling a computer by itself, they started moving in the direction of I this, I that, everything is connected. And ultimately, that led to iCloud and, an entire ecosystem that they were promoting. And, at the time, no one was doing that in personal computing. So sometimes, you want to tinker around the edges and you don't want to rock the boat too much. However, as Steve Jobs has demonstrated, and as the 50 different case
Mm-hmm.
studies in the book demonstrate, it's really the bold, decisive types of move that really unleash revenue growth.
Agreed. And it's just amazing when you think you almost have to ouster your CEO, bring in a new CEO who is bold enough to make that move and to have the backing to support that move. It's amazing.
Absolutely.
So then let's talk about rethinking your future. I mean, I got a good read out of that chapter and about the 250-year plan, but in particular, if you would kind of talk about reimagining your brand's future.
Sure. And this was a lot of fun to research as well. And
I bet.
and what I uncovered was the most successful companies, all of them. I couldn't find an example of a highly successful company that didn't fall into this pattern, but they all evolve constantly. And so, I give the example of Panasonic and Konosuke Matsushita. Back in the early 1900s, he starts this tiny little business with his wife and her brother in a house with a dirt floor, and they make one product, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they're making things like electric lights for bicycles. And what do? They constantly, every single year, they start evolving, and then over time they become a $7-8 billion conglomerate that's in
Mm-hmm.
10, 11, 12 different industries. Or you look at Amazon, that's a really simple example, right? They start selling books online, and now they're a powerhouse in online hosting and online storage, and now they're getting into voice search with Alexa, and they're a leader in many different areas, whether it's retail or whether it's in computer hosting, and so that's pretty typical for any of the mega successful companies that we found was whether we're looking at a company that literally started selling vegetable oil, like Tata Consultancy, and then it became a multi-billion-dollar consulting agency,
Mm-hmm.
or whether we're looking at Amazon or Matsushita. They all follow the pattern of constantly reinventing themselves.
Tom, it's that time in the show when it's time for me to ask you the 5 most important questions you're going to be asked today. Are you ready?
Okay, yes, I think I'm ready.
All right, so we're going to basically have to pick between 2 children here. Boston Strong or Stratabeat?
Boston Strong.
Good answer. Good politically correct answer. Show you I've read the book. Dick Fosbury or Billy Bean?
Oh, I think I'm going to go with Billy Bean.
Good. Now here's one that's really going to be tough for a Bostonian. Tom Brady or Bill Belichick?
I'm going to go with Bill Belichick.
All right, well, here's a softball for you then. Rethink your audience or rethink your future?
I would start with Rethink Your Audience.
All right, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today, Tom, is biscuits or cornbread?
I'm going to go with biscuits.
Good. So, Tom, where can people find out more about you? Pick up a copy of the book. Follow your thoughts and leadership.
Sure. So they can learn about me and my agency at stratabeat.com. And we're also heavy into Twitter, which is just twitter.com/stratabeat. And you can find my book on Amazon. Just search for Rethink Your Marketing, and should be the first one that pops up. And you can also go to the Rethink Your Marketing website. So it's rethinkyourmarketing.com, and that's where I blog about topics related to the book, and there's other related resources and information there as well.
Well, Tom, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Oh, thank you, Shark.
So there was my conversation with Tom Shapiro, the CEO of Stratabeat, an agency focused on helping mid-sized B2B companies grow through marketing, branding, and design, and he's also the author of Rethink Your Marketing. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with him. First, if you know much about me, then you know how I feel, how important it is to do audience targeting. You should, as he describes, rethink your audience. As he said, there are so many companies who still go after audiences equally. I still see it today as well. When you target audiences more closely who find your business and offerings relevant, especially with B2B, then you can achieve substantial growth by focusing in on them. Focus in on those personas and help your customers solve their problems. Second, I'm a fan of this if you've heard many of my other shows, but when you think of the noise that we absorb daily, deviation and surprise are so important in any form of marketing. Don't be cookie cutter in your marketing and advertising. Deviate in order to catch people's attention. You've got to cut through the noise in order to grab attention and have a message that resonates on a deeper level. And as a side note on this, rethink how they think. Connect with your audience if you can at the subconscious level. Tom brought up a story regarding how neuroscientist Antonio Damasio uncovered that we need emotions to make decisions. We make decisions based on emotions and then we rationalize them. It's not the other way around. Third, he brings up a great example on mid-market companies, and this applies to businesses of any size. Quite simply, you need to have strategic goals and know where you're going. Do you know exactly what your marketing goals are with a laser focus? Yes, you want to grow, but grow what? And to what degree? And how? As he said, be very specific. have a deadline, understand exactly what you're trying to achieve, and then you can customize your marketing to achieve that very, very directly. And that's the most efficient, powerful way to achieve your goals, is to know exactly what you're trying to do. That's a great goal for marketing and for life. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. It's been my privilege to spend this time with you in order to discuss another one of the many components that makes up marketing today. Here's yet another strategy to unleash revenue growth, and that is, join us on the next and every episode of A Shark's Perspective.